I suppose the Germans, in some sense, would have been most prone to the temptations of the Luciferian intellect, too, because they were extremely successful in their Towers of Babel.
The figure of Faust looms very large in German art and literature, obviously from Goethe onwards, but the Mephistophelian pact is just really fundamental to German culture and German consciousness.
You sell your soul to the devil, not so much for knowledge in some sense, but for power, right? And that can be technological power, but it's not knowledge. It's
all the other things that were being promised in the late 20s and early 30s in Germany, absolutely, yeah.
But artistic power, and it was the power in the elites. It was in the arts. It was in philosophy. It was in music composition. It was in everything.
You could also see that, given that Germany, in some sense, was at the pinnacle of that civilization, the fact that they were so profoundly defeated and then humiliated was also what produces a wounded pride and narcissism, and that's certainly part of the Luciferian spirit. So, but that idea. Look, here's a good example of that. So when police were interviewing children when they were investigating the satanic daycare accusations back in the 1980s, the children would come up with absolutely hair-raising tales of satanic ritual abuse, like young children. You think, well, where did they get that? Well, often what would happen was that a child with a mother who is a paranoid schizophrenic or bordering on it would start to get delusional about what people might have been doing to her child when she left them in the daycare. Now, she was guilty because she left them in the daycare. And now she's wondering, oh, well, I left my children with strangers. What could they be up to? And then because she was bordering on psychosis, she'd have these incredible delusional fantasies. And then, being disturbed, she'd start to bother her children. It's like, wait, does anybody do anything to you? And children partly construct the way that they react to the world by looking at whether what they say grasps the attention of adults. And so the child would be struggling to find the words that would satisfy the mother's curiosity, and struggling with that, and then they'd go to sleep at night and have a dream. And the dream would get nightmarish, and that's because the dream was trying to model what it is that the mother was calling forth out of them. And then you could run that for a couple of weeks, and the child would be telling all sorts of horrific stories. And then the police would come in, and they'd investigate in relationship to the children, and they'd get even more grotesque and catastrophic fantasies out of the kids. And then they'd think, well, the kids couldn't be inventing this, but they weren't. They were co-inventing it. And this is what happened, in some sense, to Hitler under the sway of the German people. It's like he had his flaws, many of them, right? Many, wounded narcissism being not paramount among them, because he was also very orderly and disgust sensitive.
Which is funny, because he had suppurating gums. So it's like, poor guy.
Yeah, well, right. Well,
like he was like, vile in certain senses, and then overcoming it and scouring rats and homeless and Slavs and Jews
exactly.
with his own, like, disdain for his, twisted psyche.
And for his own mortality.
Yeah.
Right? And he was a worshiper of the will. He was perfectly proud that he could stand like this for hours on end in the back of a car. He regarded that as a signal evidence of his discipline and conscientiousness, Right. And so, but in any case, Hitler was willing to go exactly where the mob took him, and was already motivated to go in a very dark direction. He'd been rejected, by the Vienna School of Art 3 times. He was a struggling street artist. He'd been brutalized by World War I. He was a decorated war hero. I think he was the only survivor of part of his platoon, because a grenade blew up all of his friends when he was off doing something peripheral. And so he had a survivor's complex as well, and an idea that he had a destiny because of that. And then he was homeless, as you pointed out. And of course, the communists were threatening Germany at the time, and there were reason to be paranoid about that. And it was all set up for a perfect storm. But Hitler definitely allowed the mob to call forth the darkest fantasies possible out of the recesses of his soul.
In light of that, I'd like to read to you what Heinrich Heine, the great German poet, wrote exactly 100 years before Hitler came to power. And this is so relevant to our themes of the need for God and religion. So this is a secular Jew writing this, the great German poet Heinrich Heine. Christianity, and this is its greatest merit, has somewhat mitigated that brutal German love of war, but it could not destroy it. Should that subduing talisman, the cross, be shattered, the frenzied madness of the ancient warriors that insane berserk rage of which Nordic bards have spoken and sung so often, will once more burst into flame. This talisman, the cross, is fragile, and the day will come when it will collapse miserably. Then a play will be performed in Germany, which will make the French Revolution look like an innocent walk in the park.